Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Dega Fangad. I'm an internal medicine physician here in Ashburn, Virginia with Delight Medical and Aesthetics. Today I wanted to talk about what I think everybody should do to make sure that their immune system is in the best possible shape it can be, especially now with COVID-19 and the flu season that will be coming in the fall and winter. I'm going to start by sharing a story about me and kind of intertwine that into what my suggestion is for everybody. I grew up in West Africa, and when I was growing up, I used to play outside a lot. I had the really good mood. I was a really happy kid, and one of the things that we used to do when I was growing up was we used to go farming. So we would go on long treks to the farm. We would work outside for extended periods of time, and then we would walk back home. And we did this continuously for years. And when I came to the United States, I was indoors a lot. I went to school, a lot of indoor activities. But one of the things that I noticed for me was that my mood was really different while I was in the States compared to when I was back home in West Africa. Now, at first I thought it was because I was homesick, but as the time went by, I continued to notice that I had a depressed mood, and I was getting sick a lot, and I was always tired. And it wasn't until I went to medical school and then residency, when I had one of my annual physical, that she decided to check my vitamin D levels. Lord and behold, my vitamin D was pretty low. I believe it was at a 9, and your levels should be at about 20 or more. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, for me, vitamin D is a very important and integral part of your immune system. And so when I was struggling with vitamin D deficiency, I was experiencing symptoms such as fatigue, tiredness, I was getting sick a lot, and my mood was really depressed, amongst other things. I never had all the other symptoms such as bone pain or muscle pain that can come with vitamin D deficiency. But I had vitamin D deficiency because I was in the United States. Now, why is that? Well, I grew up in West Africa, and in that area, I was always outside as a child. So the way vitamin D works is, when the sun hits your skin, it converts your vitamin D from the inactive vitamin D to active vitamin D. So me being outside all the time with the activities that I did as a child exposed me to greater levels of vitamin D than when I was here. When I moved to the States, not only did I move away from the equator, the United States, and I had less sun exposure to my skin, and I also spent a lot more time indoors than I did outdoors. So as a result, I converted less vitamin D from the inactive form to the active form, and that led to me being sick a lot, led to me being depressed in terms of my mood, and also led to me being tired a lot. Those three things, I strongly believe, my deficiency in vitamin D contributed to those symptoms. Now, why is vitamin D important? So vitamin D is a hormone, and this hormone is really important and integral for bone health, but also for your immune system. And the way that we convert vitamin D is UV rays, specifically UVB rays, converts the inactive form of vitamin D to the active form. And the highest concentration of UVB rays is going to be in the equator regions of the world. So for me, being West Africa, I was very close to the equator, so I had higher concentrations of UVB rays on my skin, so I was able to convert the inactive form to the active form. Now, if you look at the statistics, 42% of Americans currently struggle with vitamin D deficiency, and a large percentage of those patients are people of darker skin or people of color in general. And the reason why this is, let's do a little history lesson. So everybody originated from Africa, and people who were in Africa years and years ago needed to have more concentrated melanin on their skin to protect them from UVB rays. UVB rays is typically the UV rays that's going to cause a sunburn and is also going to cause cancer, specifically melanoma. So our body adapted to protect us from the UVB rays by giving us higher concentrations of melanin. Now, as we evolved and we moved, people who moved away from the equator further north needed less and less concentrations of melanin. So as you move further up, you notice that people get lighter and lighter and lighter. If you compare someone who's Scandinavian to someone who is from West Africa, for example, their melanin concentrations are significantly different because they needed different levels of melanin to protect them from the sun. So if you're Scandinavian, you need less melanin because you don't need too much sun to convert your inactive vitamin D to your active vitamin D. But if you're in West Africa, for example, you need a higher concentration of sunlight to convert your vitamin D inactive to your active vitamin D. Now, we're in the Western world and a lot of things are happening. So we have immigration and we have our new Western way of living. So let me start with our Western way of living. More people in Africa and around the world are working from indoors versus working outdoors. That means that they are converting their inactive vitamin D to vitamin D at a lesser concentration than those who work outdoors. Right? So take, for example, someone who's African, but they work in an office all day and then they come home at night. Well, even though they're right there in West Africa, close to the equator, where they should be able to convert their vitamin D from inactive to active, because they're not actually outside, they're going to have a deficiency of vitamin D. And then take someone who's of African descent, for example, who moves to the UK or the US or to northern parts. Well, they're at even more of a disadvantage because now they're not only not close to the equator where they have high concentrations of UVB rays to convert their inactive vitamin D to their active vitamin D, they're much further away, right? So they're not going to be able to convert that vitamin D, but also they're working indoors again. So if you're working indoors and there's no sunlight coming in, then you're not going to be able to convert your vitamin D from inactive to active. And that's what happened to me. I grew up in an environment where I was outside all the time, and so my vitamin D levels were optimal, I assume, because I never had those symptoms. But when I moved to the United States and I was indoors a lot and the concentration of UVB rays that was hitting my skin was less, I started to have more symptoms of vitamin D, such as tiredness, fatigue, depressed mood, and other things. So the reason why this is important is because the larger percentage of people who have vitamin D deficiency, like I said before, are people of color. And the reason why is because they have a harder time converting the vitamin D from inactive to active. And then you add the addition of our society, our Western way of living, where we're working more indoors. And so when you add that, it makes it even more difficult for your vitamin D levels to be optimal. So, and let's bring this back to COVID-19. We have seen that a high percentage of patients who are dying from COVID-19 have been found to be vitamin D deficient. Now, this is just a correlational study, but again, if you just look at it, if you're vitamin D deficient and vitamin D plays an integral part in your immune system, then when you do contract a virus you're most likely going to be susceptible to struggling with that infection versus someone who is optimal in their vitamin D and they can fight the infection better. So African Americans and Latinos who are vitamin D deficiency are also the same people who are dying more from the virus. So for me, what I tell my patients, and I tell all of my patients, not just patients of color, but I tell them that the best thing that they can do is to make sure that their vitamin D levels are optimal. Not only because it's going to help them with their mood, but also because if your vitamin D levels are optimal, it's going to decrease your chances of struggling with respiratory infections such as colds, bronchitis, and even pneumonia. So the bottom line is, in my opinion, the one thing that you can do for your health, especially with COVID-19 and flu season coming, is make sure that you speak to your doctor and have your vitamin D levels checked. You want to make sure that your vitamin D levels are optimal. I prefer from 30 to 40 for your levels. And if you're not there, or if you're less than 20, then your physician is most likely going to prescribe a higher concentration of vitamin D so that you can become more optimal. If you don't have a physician, I strongly encourage you to find someone who can check your levels. You can go to an urgent care, or you can find a doctor, a cash-based doctor, who can draw your labs and check your vitamin D levels and help you get to your optimal vitamin D. Here's my disclaimer. Do not take vitamin D without seeing a physician. The reason being that vitamin D can be toxic to the body, and we need to check your levels with blood work to make sure that you're optimal before we can put you on like a maintenance dose, for example. So to recap, the one thing that you can do to make sure that your health is optimal for preparing for COVID-19 and for flu is making sure that your vitamin D levels are optimal. Vitamin D plays an important role in your immune system and also helps with your mood. And right now, everybody has been, for the most part, stuck indoors because of COVID-19. So the chance of your vitamin D levels being low is pretty high at the moment. So I encourage you to talk to your physician, check your vitamin D levels, make sure that they're optimal, and once your vitamin D levels are optimal, you would know that at least you're doing one thing to help you keep your immune system in the best shape that it can be in preparation for whatever virus or bacteria may come your way. If you are in Virginia and you do not have a physician, I am seeing patients via telemedicine. So you can go to my website at delightmd.com. That's DELIGHTMD.com. And you can sign up for a virtual visit. We can discuss your medical conditions and check your labs, and we can make sure that we optimize your vitamin D levels. If you're not in the Virginia area, I encourage you to find a physician and make sure that you check your vitamin D levels and have those optimized as well. Share this video with your friends and family so they can also optimize their health in preparation for the fall and winter. I hope this was helpful. See you on my next video. Bye.